Okay, we are live. Welcome, everybody. I have Kitty as a guest here today, and I'm so excited for our conversation. I have been seeing you around the online world for quite a long time now, so it's great that we finally connected and we have so much to talk about. But why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself and your business?
I agree. It has been a long time coming. So I'm excited to be here. Um, I am a life coach by the last 7 years of working, and then I branched over to become a business mentor for life coaches. So my ultimate mission and goal is advocacy for the industry to really change some things around and go in a better direction, but also just to bring more coaches into just into the world. And I think with so much that's happened in the last couple of years, and a lot going on and changing, and it's just time that we have people in place to help everyone see what's inside of them. And so that's why I'm here.
Absolutely fantastic. And I love the topic that you are bringing to the table today because it's one of those, shall we say, myths that you hear a lot and you just go, oh, yeah, okay, but you don't really stop and think about it. What does charging what you're worth even mean? And how does that advice help somebody who's like, okay, well, but I don't know what I'm worth?
Yeah.
How do you use advice like charge your worth?
Yeah. So it's a really nuanced conversation. And I think ultimately there's a few things that come before the charging your worth conversation, really. When we see that, when we come into the space, we see it everywhere. I mean, it really is something that maybe 3 or 4 years ago became kind of a catchphrase and everybody started saying it. And then we all started moving in that direction. For someone who is new or hasn't quite gotten to that space and expansion where their business is really feeling comfortable, charging your worth is a very uncomfortable assumption, right? Because we base it off of our own personal worth versus the programming or the content, the result, the transformation, and even just the business structure in general. So it seems that there's so many things that have to lead up to somebody getting to stage 4, 5, 6, where you would say, okay, now is a good time to implement this charge your worth kind of thought and mentality. But ultimately, I
I
think,
really appreciate that because I feel like when I was starting out, especially, like, oh, I don't think I'm worth very much.
right,
Okay,
right.
charge my worth is 25 bucks.
Yeah, and it's hard at that point to even feel like sometimes 25. I can remember thinking 37 was a lot for like a month worth of meeting with me and all of this stuff, and I was like giving my all for that amount of money, and at that time that was very hard for me to put. I just couldn't put anything else in there because that space felt very awkward to me, that I would be asking someone to trust me for thousands of dollars seemed very unreasonable, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes to where, again, another nuance to it is you have to be in the right audience space too. And
Mhm.
so if you're sitting at a table or your audience happens to be those who maybe don't have careers and they're looking for a better career, it's going to be really hard for them to be able to afford what you're ultimately worth, which as a human is immeasurable, right? So and then trying to figure out, well, is this enough? Because someone is saying this is worth so much more, yet my audience cannot afford the investment at this time. It's a lot of balance, a lot of checks and balances that we have to put into place. But so, and from experience, that mindset, you come to a point where it really is internalized. So it doesn't matter how good your programming is, you just start to think, well, that's it. I'm not worth much, right? I'm just obviously it's me because that person over there is able to sell something far less valuable. And here I am struggling to get that across, right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of languaging to it that I think is a little misconstrued. And then there's a lot of just the basic backgrounds that you need, the foundations that you need to start. And then there is the level of business that you're on that would make it make sense. But I would actually encourage it to be more of an affirmation versus a business tool. And I think that was, you said it's a terrible advice, because I'm pretty sure that was what I said to you, but it is terrible business advice to say to someone, charge your worth, because I mean, what's
But
the
as
thing?
an affirmation, you think that's something worth saying to yourself?
I think possibly that's where it came from. Is
Hmm.
somebody said, I am worthy, and then it becomes charge your worth, because now you can start to move into that headspace of, I'm worthy of being here. I'm worthy of providing this result. I'm worthy of helping people in this capacity. And I think for women more so than men, I'm worthy of making money for something that I do. And we as caregivers are so often just like, well, it comes naturally to me, or I just want to help people. And
Mhm.
then that was sort of to bring us out of that, it was to move us forward with that affirmation of, well, you do deserve and are worthy of charging more. But it
Mhm.
became something that just became a hashtag versus, you know, clarity
Yes,
around the
these
price.
things often do.
Yeah,
So what advice do you have for people about the business tools for pricing?
sure. So, well, number one, I would say I'm so sorry, my nose is itchy. One of the things that we lack so much when you come into the coaching space, you decide, you see it most of the time, we catch like it on a Google search or an advert or something where we're like, I want to branch out, see what's out there. And then you catch this idea of coaching, and the idea is very shiny, but it's well marketed. And so because of that, when you come in, you instantly, it's like the red carpet rolls out and people are welcoming you, but that's all marketing strategy. And it's very little of business strategy. And even when I say business strategy, a lot of it tends to be marketing strategy in the online space, but it's very little do you hear about how to set up a proper business. Very little do you hear about how to acquire the actual skills of coaching. And so when we come in, and especially for new coaches, it's like, whoa, I've got to be doing all of these things. I've got to set up a website. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And we lack so
Mm.
much clarity. And in that lack of clarity is where our confidence lies. So we are only going to be as confident as we are clear on what we're there to do. So my ultimate message, my ultimate advice would be, first set up your foundations. What are you here to do? What is your overarching goal? And then what do you need to survive? Because if you're leaving a full-time job to enter into this space, it's quite different than someone who's like, I'm going to try this as a part-time thing or as a hobby, like all of those things factor in. If this is your full-time job, you have to pay bills. You're going to need to evaluate those costs a little bit sooner. You might need a different level of team or no team. It all depends on what you can invest at that level. So it really is a matter of, there's a formula, obviously, to just knowing what you need and what you have to have from your business. But then also, you have to know how well your programming works. So who is your audience and how are you serving them? And if that doesn't work, if you've never done it one time, you don't know if that's exactly where you're going. You don't know what you need to tweak. So, sometimes coming out of the gate and just saying, I'm going to charge $10,000 for this program, that might very well be worth it. But at stage number one, $10,000 doesn't make any sense. You don't have much proof or validation on that. So the
Yeah.
first thing you're going to do, right, is put it out there, and no one's going to bite, or maybe one person. And then what do? We take that as, we're not worthy of charging $10,000 for a program. So, you don't want to come in and just instantly scale and soar, because that just causes you to fall. But if you come in and you
Yeah,
go,
and I think there's 2 different parts to making that $10,000 price tag worth it, which is partly having the social proof, the testimonials, the people who have been through it and have gotten a great result. And when you have those, that gives you so much more confidence that you'll be out there selling it because you know that it's worth that. You've seen it be worth that.
yeah.
And that makes a huge difference when you're on a phone call with someone trying to sell them into a high ticket program. If there's doubts in your mind, if you're not really sure that you're going to get them a result that's worth that, then it comes through.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what you end up doing is you end up trying to convince versus relying on the confidence that you know that it works. So if
Mhm.
if you're caught up in that mix of where you're trying to convince people, then one of you isn't catching the value of it, right? Either you aren't clearly relaying the message or they're just not clearly receiving it. But that's where that's where those little pockets lie, where we just have to expand in that space, be better in that space, and come out with more clarity on the other side. And so, your confidence and your clarity is going to equal you gaining clients, which get you the cash, which get you the business results. So it really is like a whole, yes, it's a holistic thing. You have to have all of the pieces of the puzzle together to make the puzzle work, right?
Do you recommend for people to do a beta program that is free or lower cost?
I would suggest probably lower cost. Some people do not have the confidence, and so therefore they do it for free, and that's okay. But what happens when we do that is that it's hard to then just jump up enough, because now you don't always have the best results. So someone who enters into a beta program for free, they could be the absolute best client you've ever had. But you could also have crickets on the other end. So they might not be invested at all to do it because they thought, well, it's free. Like, we really do it.
I'll sign up, whatever.
Yeah, right. Like, I'll try it out, but then, something else comes up and they decide that that's more important, or they want to do something else, or they're just not quite feeling it. The whole purpose of the beta is to have people come in and then help you to be sure that the program is solid. So you really want their feedback, and you want very engaged people, and you're going to offer them a discount or a break, right? Like some kind of lower price or something else. It could just be sidebar conversations and private coaching or whatever it is, but that's because you want that feedback from them, and you're willing to make the exchange because in the end they're going to be awesome social proof. And you can look at any brand to see that has happened. That's always kind of the case, is, hey, we're tossing this out there. Take a look at it, or try it on, give us your feedback. And then there it is. And suddenly people are talking about this new thing. And you're like, how does everybody know about this? Or that's how brands have stayed top of the line brands for so long, because they show up, they've done the work, they've gotten the feedback, and they continue to improve or maintain the quality level that they have. So that's really what we have to strive for in this space as well. Yeah.
I like how in your programs you have a very step-by-step, like where to start with for new coaches, how to build the foundations, what to do next, what to do next, what to do next, to be able to scale up. Because like you said, I think a lot of times coaches are just left with like, great, you're a coach, here's all the things. And you just need somebody to kind of lead you by the hand.
Sure. And I think there's a lot of talk out there that says, like, coaching is such a corrupt industry, or, it doesn't hold the value that it says it does. But I think there's a difference between marketing and even social marketing versus influencership versus coaching, right? They're all different in their capacity. What happens is we fool ourselves into thinking one is the other. So coaching is quite different than all the rest of that, but we get kind of sucked into the illusion of how it should look. And the big names and the ones who are able to do these big, massive things, they have large teams behind them. They have 10, 15, 20, 30 years of experience behind them. And we forget that it's okay to say, I am a startup. We forget to say that it's okay. And we don't talk on that level. So when someone comes in and they ask questions, if you can pick up the cues, you're able to say, you're not quite there yet. There's more questions that you have to ask in the beginning. There's different language at the beginning we use. It's getting to that point where it's like, it's conquering the mindset. It's conquering the business model. It's doing a lot of things that don't seem fun or sexy or whatever, but they are going to be your foundational pieces. And when you get through that piece, then you get to market yourself, you get to build all of that trust and authority around your business. And suddenly, things take off and you're like, whoa, I'm glad I did it then. But what I see are so many coaches that are 3, 4, 5 years in that are now like, I need to go back to the beginning. I have done all of this stuff. I've wasted money on programs, which none of it's a waste. You just did it before you needed to. So those $5,000 or $10,000 marketing programs aren't going to benefit you until you have these things in place first. Then you're going to see that return on investment It just didn't
Yeah.
happen right away.
That's like a lot of times I tell people, don't spend your energy or your money on traffic until you know that you have a website that's actually going to do what you want it to do.
Right.
Could be
Right.
bringing tons of people there and they don't convert, they don't sign up, they don't get on your email list, and it's just a waste. You got to make sure that web page is optimized. That's the foundation.
It really is. And if you don't know how to read those numbers or how to look at those results, you're not going to do it. Or if you don't have time to do that, so then
Mm.
you're just sort of wasting the space, really. And even if you took all of your information and you said to a designer who's going to set it all up, right?
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
What
geez.
on earth is that?
I hope everything's okay.
Goodness gracious. Tornado warning.
Yeah. So do you need to go?
What in the world? I don't
Where
think
do
I
you
know
live?
yet. I'm in Maryland.
Oh
We
my
don't have
gosh.
tornadoes here. That is wild. Okay, well, after this interview, I'll go down to the basement, but I'm not going
Well,
to.
if we need to cut the
I
interview
mean,
short,
it's not even raining right now. There's no wind. There's nothing.
that's when it happens. Okay, so we
All
will
the
keep an
people
eye on
who
you.
are watching from like places like Ohio that get actual tornadoes are like, you have no idea what warning signs you're supposed to be looking for.
Right, right. Yeah, concerned. So we'll watch that window behind you. And well, if you need to go, then we certainly understand. This is par for the course, Miss Caroline, for how we have connected. It just seems like there's always something.
It's
Um,
true. And that's life too. I
it
mean,
is.
we're moms and business people, and you always have in your mind how this perfect day is going to go, and it never happens. There's stuff
Yeah.
changes, stuff comes up, you have to answer emails, a phone call happens, a tornado warning happens.
It's actually probably a very good time to interject that information and say this is another part of worthiness that we hide so much of, like how things really are, because we don't feel like we match up. And so, we tend to hide our kids. We're like, oh gosh, when we first start out, then you can tell, like, people who've been doing it a while, either they have somebody with the child or you're just like iPad in the corner for a minute.
Yeah,
And during
people
lockdown.
think that they need to be like polished and professional, when my observation has been that people, your audience is a lot more responsive to honesty, authenticity, and
Sure.
like when you can be real with them, they relate to that so much, and that builds trust.
So does. It so does. I mean, if you could see right now, and I won't pan out, I'm actually repainting and doing things to the bedroom. So, like, we're in a tiny space that, like, just looks good. So trust me, there's always something on the everybody's got their little secret. But yeah, I mean, it's we can't compare ourselves to everybody else. And I know that they say, like, that's important. Competition can really energize some people and motivate them. The thing is, all you need to know is that there is competition. That means that your particular niche or client or whatever it is that you're going for exists, and that
It's
you can
needed.
you can be here in this space. That's the important part. But then you back out. You don't pay attention to what they're saying. You don't need all of that fluff, because what you're going to do is you're either going to start becoming what they are and lose yourself in that process, or you're going to get frustrated, feel like you again don't match up and you don't
I
belong.
think it's so easy to get frustrated because we see these big results being bragged about, which is great. It's like, okay, it's inspiring. It's good to know that's possible, but I get very discouraged by it. And I always have to remember that you're not seeing the full picture. Again, the same as the small part of the room. A lot of times these big results come with spending millions in ads,
Yeah.
and it's worth it for them because they're a big enough name that they can make that back, or having childcare, and there's a lot of money that goes into it. And I really appreciated when I was taking a course, with a copywriter and launch specialist. Her name is Sage Polaris. She's the first person I ever encountered who was really honest about how her results happened. She showed us how she had had this amazing launch, and then she said, now remember, this went to a warm audience. And that moment was so powerful to me, because so many people will sort of fudge the results. They'll lead you to think that you could get this result from a cold audience because they
Yeah.
didn't specify that, oh, actually, they had a list of 50,000 people who had already were interested in what they were doing. And that's why the launch was so successful. So you're out there trying to sell something brand new to people who've never heard of you and going, how come I'm not getting those results?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the smoke and mirrors of everything. And when you start to be able to catch, you can catch it in the way that the post is made. So we tend to look for things we want to look for validation in results by we look at things like they're sponsored. That's a sponsored ad, that I should do that too, because then it looks like I've made it. Or we just, those little things that we think make it look good. But actually, if somebody says to me kind of that same thing, I've had so much success without a sponsored ad, because that means that you're doing that legwork. You're actually in your business and you're doing it. But it also means that you know exactly who you're talking to and how you're doing it.
And
Those,
another mistake with doing the sponsored ads is you don't know what results that person's getting from that ad. That ad might be doing terribly and you just don't know.
yeah. And you have a team of people. By that point, there's usually someone else, right? And a lot of times, even when you respond on social media, the person that's responding back isn't what you think. And so it's a lot. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of gray area to it all. But yeah, it's when we get into this and we think like, I just have to, like you said, I just have to perfect it. It just has to be, it has to look, it just has to look good, or no one's going to. You have to have that audience, right? That's literally the first thing that you really need after you've decided what you're going to do, is just, who am I talking to? And being yourself. I mean, if you're serving moms and you have a kid show up in the middle, and I did this for years, somebody would yell from the bathroom like, oh, so and so needs their butt wiped, or we've had naked trespassers. I mean, it happens. It just happens. And when you have that go on, or the dog barks in the middle, like, that's, like you said, that's life. And that's life working from home. That's life making it,
And we're all
making
human
it.
beings. We're not robots.
Oh my gosh.
Even
Right.
those super successful people that you're looking up to are still human beings.
Right. And we all have that flaw, or we all have that thing that is just like, not perfect either. But when you get there, and I think this is where worth does come in, is like, you do at some point have to sell your brand, which is you have to sell yourself. And you're worth a lot. You, the person, are worth a lot. And that's what we try in the beginning. We get mixed up there, because I will guarantee most who are just starting out don't feel like they're worth a lot. Like it takes our own healing and our own mindset work, and lots of years of us practicing what we preach, kind of, or for sure practicing what we preach. But when you get there, then you're like, oh, I definitely see more and more of the value, because it's hard to explain at first what the value is if you haven't really gotten there yet.
Yeah,
And so,
that mindset work is everything. And I really was startled when I became an entrepreneur. Like, I did not expect that I was going to have to do so much work on myself and my mind, and unpacking all kinds of scarcity problems, and going from being a stay-at-home mom with a school teacher husband cutting coupons to like, no, I'm going to go out there and sell high ticket programs and services and be, going in completely the opposite direction, to stop thinking about like, oh no, I can't spend anything because it's going to be,
yeah,
it's a lot
yeah.
of work, a lot of work.
Yeah, to get to that level of comfort where you're just
Yeah.
unafraid, right? I mean, that does take a lot of work, and you have to change that old programming. The old programming is so embedded in us that, some people are very fortunate to not have had those negative influences as deeply ingrained in them. Some people just didn't take it on that way. Other people just had more positive influence. And I think that might be why you even see so many who come from an entrepreneurial background can be successful entrepreneurs pretty quickly, because they already know, they've been through this piece. Like, if our children decided to do it, it would be different, because there's lessons to be taught along the way. And they see it differently. Like, that whole failure thing is actually market research. Like, keep failing, because that's all
I
good.
can't even imagine what my kids are experiencing as like what work life looks like. Like they came
Yeah.
home yesterday and there was glitter on the floor. They were so excited because I was doing a branding photo shoot and I had
Oh,
glitter cannons like, oh, look at this abundance falling from the sky, you know. So they were playing with all this glitter and like my 6-year-old son knows to ask, "Are you in a meeting?" Because he's like
yeah.
never puts pants on, so he has to know that he can't come in and be on camera. Sorts of weird things that that this like normal mom work life now.
It's so true. It's so true. When I did a program a couple of years ago, and I always said I'm going to go talk to the ladies, and then I would see my kids sitting at the iPad video, and they'd say, "Good morning, ladies," and I have videos of them doing this whole thing where they were the ones on camera talking to them and like pretending, and yeah, but it teaches them that they can do whatever they want, right? And it breaks that cycle, which is we didn't learn that because we came from a more corporate structure. Now you're seeing more of this, and when we break that pattern, then we change how it goes in the future. Other people can see that, oh, they've done it, and I
Yeah.
think that's also why telling the truth is so important. Like you mentioned, honesty in your numbers. I did a case study in one of the groups, and I was actually going to do it the other day in mine, but this week sort of took a turn. So what we focused on other things, but we the case study in this particular was, someone saying, I was making 5 figures. I started online whatever, and now I make 6 figures. And I can't remember exactly word for word, but anyway, it's all these little things. And so then the question is to ask, what do you think about this? What does this say? And everyone thinks automatically they're scamming me somehow. But
Mhm.
all it is to look at it. Sometimes if you're right at the cusp on 5 figures, you could easily make an extra $1,000 a year and hit 6 figures, right? You could easily change careers but that's a part-time gig. You could have been living with someone and not paying rent. Like all of these things behind the scenes are what we don't know. And so when someone comes out and out of integrity markets to us in a way that they know is not really the truth, even though factually it's true, that hurts that takes us back to old programming. That hurts what we think. That
Yeah.
really triggers in us that I can't do this. There's no way I could just start out and in 6 months go from 5 figures to 6. Like we just all those thoughts come
Yeah.
in
I saw one a few weeks ago that really got me, and I was just like, this is just the most ridiculous one I've seen yet of these huge claims about really fast growth. And I think in that case, that person left being pretty high up on the corporate ladder, had a large network, knew a lot of people, had people to talk to. It's so different when she says, "Oh, I got to a $200,000 business in 11 months." Then I'm feeling terrible because 2 years in, I'm not at that, you know?
Yeah.
But it's so different because, again, I was starting from being a stay at home mom cutting coupons. I did not have a network. I didn't know anybody in the corporate world. I didn't have any of that. So it's not that it's bad that she did it. It's not that it's bad that she's bragging about it, but it's not realistic for most people.
Sure. Yeah.
So that one got to be a lot.
Absolutely. And money is a real problem for people. It's not this, even though we can consider it energy, or we can consider it an exchange, or we can, whatever you want to call it, the reality of the situation is money is make or break. Money is starvation versus feeding your kids. Money is your house versus not your house. Like all of those things are very real, very, very in the present right now problems. And so when we promise something out and we do it as like, I mean, we hear it all the time too, like, well, you must not be willing to invest in yourself then, or you're not hungry enough for this. No, I mean, I have children to feed, right? And so that is also something that when we start into pricing is hard, because people have remembered how hard it was to invest that first dollar or that first 1,000 or the first 5,000. And then there's also the times that we have invested it and, they've maxed out credit cards or they've gotten another job or they've done whatever it took to make sure it happened. And then nothing came back because there was no follow through. There was no additional help. There was no making sure that they got where they needed to go. The promise ended at the end of the program. And so when we do those things out of lack of integrity, then we're hurting people. I mean, the coaching industry in itself is 76% will leave. And it just really bothers me that we would rather lose 76% because of really strong beliefs that we have set up for ourselves. I mean, they're all made up, right? We've just come to these beliefs about the industry, and we've forced people into these notions that they have to do certain things. They leave because they don't feel like they can match up. That's the bottom line. If they felt like they could match up even eventually, they would stay. But the state of the world and the mental health crisis and just the way that, even people needing jobs, these are all great things that we can add on to or extend or put into businesses. Everybody can benefit from life coaching, no matter what walk of life you are, right? So to lose 76% of them is a huge deal. That's a really big problem because there's so much that can be done with that. The flip side of it is the 24% that are staying in the game. Are they actually helping, or do they become coaches of coaches, which is what I did. And I resisted for a long time. But so often you just see we're in our own bubble a lot of the time, right? And so it's taken on that weird context too. But it's like, because who knows your worth more than those who work in the same industry, Like, we don't always know the worth of what somebody else is. There's so many people in our lives that they work every day, and I guarantee we have no idea what they do. We just don't, and we don't ask, and we don't bother to understand the value of it. And probably at times we've judged what they make. Oh, well, they just go to work every day and they make $500,000. How is that possible? But we just assume what we think. So the whole thing about it is, yes, it's great to work toward that. It's great to put our mindset on, I am worthy of having this. I am worthy of charging a higher level. I'm worthy of feeding my family. I'm worthy of taking this mission and carrying it on. Because if your business isn't profitable, you cannot maintain that. I'm worthy of all of it. But we have to stop saying charge your worth, because that's just not language that's making sense to people. It's terrible advice.
It ends up being pretty empty. It's just,
where do you pull the number from?
Nice at first, and then you're like, but wait a minute.
Right. Like, you're like, yeah. And then we start grabbing numbers. That's literally what ends up happening, is you're just grabbing a number that feels good because somebody else said so. I get so many calls or messages or whatever. And the question is, what would you charge for this? I mean, I ask it too. What do you think is a fair price for this? But then it's not just, I can't just throw a number at you and tell you what I think is a fair price for this. So you're always going to get what do you think? And then you're frustrated. People are frustrated. But there's a whole, you got to work it backwards a bit, and sort of really decide what it is worth. What is the value of it? Who are you selling it to? What are you trying to accomplish in the end, right? Because I had somebody tell me once to stand in front of a mirror and just say numbers until I got to a number that I couldn't say anymore. Until I got to an uncomfortable, swear that was the advice on how to get to my number. So I couldn't do it. I was like, no, these numbers seem ridiculous to me. But I mean, I could say a really high number. Did it feel good? Not necessarily. So then I started doing some research, and I was like, oh, there's some other things that we have to put into play here. And that's it. But to say to somebody, stand in front of a mirror and charge whatever you get to, for some people that's $50, for some that's 50,000. I mean, where do we pull the number from?
I really liked, my business coach gave me advice to look at my exact expenses for the month, double it, and then think of that as 100% of my time. And whatever project I'm pitching to someone, what percent of my time is that going to take? Well, we already know what 100% of my time is worth. So do the math.
Yeah.
A much more practical way of approaching it. And I also appreciated that it wasn't like, oh, get to the bare minimum of like, I'm just covering my mortgage and feeding the kids. Like, it's okay to dream a little bit bigger than that, to want to have extra, to have cushion, to have nice things, to be able to, you know,
Yeah.
live life.
Yeah, right. Yes, because it has to be a profitable business or it doesn't make any sense, right? And that's the bottom line is, you need clients in cash to make the money or you don't have a business. And then if you don't even have the clients in the cash, you're not even really having a hobby, right? So it's like there, you have to have that. At the end of the day, that's important. It's really important to have. But yeah, there has to be a formula to how you're figuring that out. Like there really has to be some set in stone way to say like, oh, this has to pay. Not just there's taxes. I mean, there's programming that we all use to make sure that we're able to do this, right? Like there's all these things that will add up. How are you affording that? And what is it going to take to make sure that it
Yeah,
works?
you can't just feel your way into it because you do have to like, what are your business expenses? Like, there's some practical considerations here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And that I think that's just the really big piece of it is that we just don't have people setting things up from the beginning. There's a lot that lacks. Like I could tell you a lot of coaches that I know that don't even have contracts. Like there's just so many things that we don't talk about because it's not the shiny stuff. It's not the fun stuff. It's not the thing that you think makes that big amount of money. And you're just like, well, I want to go over here because that person's promising me this. And you're telling me that I have to do like another 2 months of work before I can even start, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I
yeah,
mean, those promises are super tempting. Super, super
sure.
tempting. I see those people that are like, well, you could have it tomorrow.
Right. And that, I mean, I do get somebody will say to me, when can I start getting clients? And like, none of my programs tell you to not take on clients. Like, that's actually what I need you to do so that we can work through how you coach them. So,
Mm.
honestly, the conversation has to start as soon as we start. So, there's always that possibility. Whether you charge that person or don't charge that person, you're going to start right away. But now okay, now I know how to get the client. I've got to work on the business piece. There's this other piece that has to happen so that I'm making sure that this client can stay with me so that I can support them, not be resentful. I mean, how many coaches do we know that get resentful because of their time that they're spending? And you're just like, um, you know, I don't want to be upset that I gave you 2 hours of my time because A, I didn't know my boundaries. B, I didn't know how much that was worth. Like that's a lot of mental work. And we often forget too how much we've done in our life. What's your education background? Like you probably have education that's supporting this. Did you go to college and have a degree? So now what is it to pay that back? If you leave your corporate job and you go into this, you still have to pay for your education. Now how much are you charging because you have an education behind you? We tend to separate those things out of our life. How much leadership skill do you have? How much of this did you do? Do you have children? How are you paying for daycare, like you said, or how are you paying for someone to come in? Just how are you affording it? But also, what are the things that got you here? How much is your time worth, right? We all know how much our time is worth when we're sitting at the doctor's office. Guarantee you're like, I could be doing 1,000 other things right now. Well, that's the truth when you're on a call, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, you're like, okay, if I could charge the doctor right now for my time, I guarantee we would all come up with a very good number. We would be very happy with ourselves as we sit there scrolling on Facebook. Yeah.
Definitely.
But yeah,
Awesome. Well, I think this has been a phenomenal conversation, and
absolutely.
I would love for you to tell everyone more about how they can go into your world, learn more about what you do.
Sure. I would love for everybody, anyone who is interested or is already working with coaching clients, interested in becoming a life coach. I do have a group, how to life coach basically, but it's building your practice, building your life coaching business. And what we do in there is the first step is the confident coach program. With that program, you're going to learn the competencies of coaching. So it's 8 weeks. It walks you through how to be a coach, what it means to be a coach, how to provide that space for your clients, and also helps you to set up these business foundations so that you know exactly how to set up an offer, a basic offer, but also how to price it, how to get it out there, and start building your authority and your presence in the online space. Coming in the fall will be a higher end program for those who are already in the process and have practiced it and have clients on the books, but are looking to expand. And it's going through these things as well for those who maybe don't have all of the structures set up and in place and are still going through the mindset and all of those things. But yeah, so it's Kitty_Kistler on Instagram and just Kitty Kistler. You can find me on Facebook, and then the group Becoming a Life Coach.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much for spending this time with me.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. And I want you to be safe. So now my mom is
out there. So I guess
I have been worried about you.
Take my laptop down to the basement now.
I think today is a good day to work from downstairs. Yes. Yeah. I appreciate you so much.
All right. Well, I will talk to you again soon, and I'm going to end our broadcast.